Thank you. Thank you very much, and welcome. It's a bit early for me. It's 7:30 in the morning, but I do get up quite early, and I'm very, very pleased to be with you today. Pour vous laisser savoir aussi, pendant la présentation, si jamais vous voulez vous exprimer en français, il n'y a aucun problème. And the presentation will be given in English. And of course, you can either choose English or French to share with me. I would like to acknowledge the territory on which I am speaking to you from today. We want to thank everyone who is present and acknowledge that St. Paul University is located on the traditional unceded territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation. We would like to honor the Anishinaabe, who are the caretakers of the lands and waters of the Kichisibi or Ottawa River Valley since time immemorial. We acknowledge that the site of the city of Ottawa serves as the home of the Anishinaabe as a place for spiritual ceremonies, cultural gatherings, and exchange among Indigenous people across Turtle Island. Today, the spirit of peace and friendship is the foundation of relationships among Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples from around the globe. I will not be reading my own biography because I think that you've had a chance to have a look at it. Just to let you know that I am teaching at St. Paul University and have been teaching there for the last 12 years. And also share with you how grateful I am to be spending this time with you today. I had the privilege of living and working in Lebanon from 2002 to 2004, where I contributed to what was called then an educational reform project. So thank you for being here. And I also work in the community here in the Ottawa region, where I work with caregivers. I will be sharing with you today some of my teachings and my research interests at the university, but most and foremost, I should say, wanting to spend some time with you in this chaotic and sometimes difficult time. Just to let you know that this is a picture of a view of the classroom where I tend to teach most of my courses at the St. Paul University, and wanted to share a little bit about that. We still do not have any snow at the moment. This was just taken maybe a month ago. So listening is an act of learning to receive with openness, so we can give with greater understanding and intention. I will also share today that when we do choose to listen to someone, we are allowing that person to exist. So in other words, when I'm being listened to, I know that I exist. On the other hand, if I choose not to listen, the opposite is also true. At that moment, the moment that I stop listening, the other person no longer exists. So today, it looks like a long list, but you'll see that we'll have time to cover it. Why empathic listening matters, and what is empathic listening? We'll also look at some of the foundations. We'll also see what are resonant spaces. Where are spaces basically where, and those could be moments. It's not necessarily a permanent place. It can be a moment where I feel that I am one one with life, one with other people around me. We'll look at some practical steps for resonance. We'll also share a few thoughts on intentional relational spaces, which is a model I have been working on for the last few years. And the intentional relational space is, in one way, a foundation for resonance. Look at deep listening and whole person listening, and how can we apply empathic listening in crisis contexts, and seeing how we can overcome barriers and apply empathic listening to our daily lives. Why empathic listening matters? Well, basically, it fosters trust, connection, and understanding. The moment that I practice empathy, I can create a space for trust, connection, and understanding. It also provides emotional grounding to counteract fear, isolation, and disconnection. So in other words, whenever I'm in a situation, of course, when it's safe psychologically to do so, whenever I'm in a situation where I am no longer grounded, where I am fearful, where I feel isolated and disconnected, it is time for empathic listening. So this is the other way of looking at it. If ever you're interested in what we call digging, searching a bit more in terms of where these principles come from, I work in what is called interdisciplinary research. So I tend to use all types of knowledges and make one with them. And in this case, in my teachings on empathic listening, I use concepts, I borrow, if I can use that expression, from nonviolent communication, from theory U, and from resonance theory. And these resources are included in the PowerPoint that can be shared with you. So what is empathic listening? According to Rosenberg, who's the nonviolent communication theory, listening to understand feelings and needs without judgment. 3 key words. So we're wanting to focus on feelings and needs. And of course, to be, when we say without judgment, is to be able to be as open as possible to receive, to learn to receive without judgment. With theory U, Otto Scharmer, again, we see that there's a connection here again with suspending judgment to remain fully present and open. So there's this notion here that yes, without judgment, yes, we are paying attention to feelings and needs. And at the same time, it's a question of remaining open and being present. So it does require some conscious, intentional effort. The resonance, and that's from Rosa, Hartmut Rosa, that's what creates the vibrations of shared understanding and connection. So how do I know when I'm connected? How do I know when I'm disconnected, and how can I reconnect? So it's not just a matter of saying I am disconnected. It's also to find the way, to find the vibration that will allow me to connect with the person or the group. Because sometimes empathic listening is done on a one-on-one situation. Sometimes it's also done as a group. So in my teachings, we practice both. So the foundations, again, using the three theories, the foundation, the presence. So as little distractions as possible. The non-judgment, to observe and validate feelings without evaluation. We tend, when we express ourselves, we tend to express ourselves from the point of view of an evaluation. And in this case and that's where the judgment comes from, right? If we're already entering the relationship with an evaluation, it means that we're already bringing a judgment. So to be non-judgmental is really to develop this capacity to be an observer and in the relationship be able to validate feelings. And on the resonance side, well, we're wanting to make sure that emotional alignments foster shared meaning. So in other words, when I am listening to someone, the words that I'm hearing, the way that I'm receiving what it is that I'm hearing, and the way that I'm feeling, it's all aligned. So that's why resonance is not a permanent space. Resonance are moments. We have moments of resonance. They can be quite short. They can be just a bit longer. So it's not something that we aspire to be permanently in resonance, but it's to recognize when I am aligned with head, heart, soul, and body. But not just my own head, heart, soul, and body, but also with the head, heart, soul, and body of the other person and the group. So resonant spaces. So first of all, they are spaces where people feel heard, understood, and emotionally attuned. So there is coherence between what I am thinking, what I am feeling, and what it is that I am what I am experiencing. And that's what we mean by being understood and by being emotionally attuned. So there's no distraction or distortion, I should say, between what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling. A resonant space also enables for healing. It enables for collaboration and co-creation. So when I am in resonance with self, with another person, with the group, it is a healing process. So it's not a therapy by itself, but what I like to say in my listening classes, the effect may be therapeutic. Just to be listened to know that I exist, is a form of therapeutic effect. In other words, it's healing. I know I exist. I know I matter. I know that someone is receiving what it is that I'm wanting to share, and together we can collaborate and co-create. And this is essential for navigating challenges in chaotic environments like war zones. Because what tends to happen when we are in a trauma situation, when we are in a fear-based situation, our instinct, our survival is to isolate. And yes, physically speaking, if it is dangerous, absolutely. From a psychological perspective, a spiritual perspective, those are also moments when safe to seek resonance, to seek relationship, to be able to engage in a significant relationship with someone else. And this is a way that I can, if I can use the expression, do something with my fears. So it's not just feeling it, it's being able to know that I'm feeling it, and then to be able to engage with someone else. Some practical steps for resonance. So safety tends to foster a judgmental environment. By safety here, and I know it can be physical safety, but we're also including emotional safety, spiritual safety, and intellectual safety. So yes to the body, but also when does my mind, my heart, my soul feel safe? And when they do feel safe, I am in process towards resonance. Validation, in other words, what I am feeling, what I am sensing, is being reflected back to me. There is an understanding, an affirmation from somebody else that can validate what it is that I am thinking, feeling, experimenting. And a way to enter resonance is to ask open-ended questions. Open-ended questions allows the person to tell his or her story. I will not go into all the details of what it means to create an intentional space, but I will share with you at least the definition and the purpose. The definition is that relational spaces are designed to foster trust, respect, and connection. And this is how we build a foundation for authentic, transformative interactions. And this is where you see that it's important to have a clear intention. It's important that listening be there, and you can see here. So listening is a given. It's a non-negotiable. We cannot create relational spaces if listening is not a huge component of the relationship, and also the safe space that I referred to, where my head, my heart, my body, my mind are at ease. We need to pay attention because every relational space begins with an invitation. I like to say that everything in life begins with a yes. A yes that comes from an answer to an invitation. If it's a no, well, then there won't be for this moment. It doesn't mean for life, but there won't be for this moment a relationship. So paying attention to the invitation, being welcoming, making sure there's a clear request, asking for permission before acting. What an intentional relation space does is that it allows to align the intention with the impact, because many times I get situations where people tell me, well, yeah, Marquis, you know, I'm a good person, but somehow whenever I'm in a relationship with that particular person, I'm getting a different impact. The impact is not aligned with my intention. So one way to bring intention and impact, or to align them, is to create what I'm calling a relational space. And inside that relational space, we're able to, on occasions, also have resonant spaces. So this is what deep listening is all about. It's listening to someone deeply and authentically. It affirms their existence, it validates their experience and emotions. So this is what listening does. This is what it does when we consciously decide that, yes, the moment that we will spend together, I will be listening to you. I will be sharing with you. And that listening, that deep listening, will be able to affirm your existence, your experience, and your emotions, always from a non-judgmental perspective. So this is what I call also a whole person listening, because I've been referring to the head, the heart, the body, and the soul. So what are the benefits to listening to the whole person? Because sometimes we only listen to words, sometimes we only listen to emotions. Sometimes we listen by what it is that I'm feeling when the other person is speaking. So when we do listen or learn to listen to the whole person or to welcome, invite and welcome the whole person, some of the benefits is that it builds trust and emotional safety, extremely important in times of chaos. It deepens our understanding of the speaker's perspectives and needs. We're listening for needs. We're listening for clues, in other words, to have a meaningful conversation with the other person, not necessarily to find solution, but just to help the person tell his or her story. It definitely enhances resonance and empathy, and it fosters meaningful connections. And on top of that, when I am being listened to, when the other person is able to contribute to my story, it also encourages self-reflection for both speaker and listener. So I've referred to this again, very quickly, and you'll have the notes. You'll see what it involves, how to practice. So we talked about emotional engagement, recognizing and validating, underlying the speaker's words. So I'm not just listening to words. I am engaged emotionally. I'm intellectually curious. I pay attention to the content, the logic of what's being said to understand and to a broader context. I am physically present. This is the body part, the physical part. I demonstrate attentiveness through body language, eye contact, gestures. There's also a spiritual connection. I'm attuned. I'm attuned to the speaker's deeper sense of purpose, values, or struggles. So it's one thing to recognize, to be engaged emotionally, to be curious with the ideas, to be fully present, but at the same time, I'm seeking to another type of understanding, which is a connection and attunement to what is the purpose that the other person is wanting to share with me? What are some of the values, the struggles? So this is a different way of listening. Sometimes it's also called a heart-based listening. So we can apply empathic listening in crisis contexts, in one-on-one situations, like I said, and in group settings. So, for example, one-on-one, supporting another student who is struggling with war-related anxiety. You can clarify the purpose. Let's talk about what might help you feel more grounded. Of course, ensure safety with the 4 dimensions that I've referred to: head, body, heart, and soul. Validate emotions and suggest small actionable steps like focusing on immediate tasks. We are not there to give advice, but to validate. And like I like to say, to help the person tell their story. In a group setting, we can sit in a circle, we can gather even 3 people. 3 people is a group. We set an intention that we're wanting to support each other. We create safety, and we facilitate listening based on some of the contents and ideas that I've shared with you. How to overcome barriers to empathy, challenges, and solutions. So when we talk about challenges, sometimes we're talking about being emotionally overwhelmed, to be distrustful or fearful, and time constraints. That's usually the most frequent challenges that I hear. I'm overwhelmed, I am fearful, and I feel that I don't have the time. So how do I get back into the relationship? How do I get back with the movement of life? Well, again here, Sharma proposes mindfulness. Rosenberg in his approach to nonviolence, and again, this is something that you may want to dig into, self-compassion. And Rosa, micro actions. So you see that again, we're talking about mind, we're talking about heart, we're talking about body, body in terms of actions, self-compassion in terms of soul, in terms of heart, mindfulness in terms of being able to clear the mind. So some reflection, and if you're wanting to think about, to reflect, who in my life needs to feel heard? And that could include yourself, but it also could include other people around you, other people in your circle. How can I create moments of resonance this week? How can I take time to pause, take a few minutes, and allow somebody else to exist, to do a check-in? And for example, as a practice, you could commit to practicing one act of empathic listening daily. And that would become part of what I like to call your emotional hygiene. So empathic listening as a lifeline from Rosenberg, empathy fosters respectful understanding. From Sharmer, empathy opens pathways for co-creation. From Rosa, resonance transforms alienation into meaningful connection. So the call to action is to use empathic listening to create resonant spaces for healing and collaboration. And we're almost at the end. Time does fly, but if you do have questions, I am available and I will take time, as much time as you have, to answer some of your questions. Et encore une fois, si vous préférez utiliser le français pour les questions, bien, je suis toujours disponible pour répondre à vos questions, soit en français, soit en anglais. Je vais arrêter le partage. Et si jamais vous avez une question, vous pouvez ouvrir votre microphone ou lever la main. So you can either open your microphone, turn on your microphone, or just use the hand if you would like to engage, to provide feedback in terms of what it is that you have been listening to for the last 50 minutes.
Mr. Marquis, hello. Firstly, I would like to thank you for all the insights that you have shared. They are indeed interesting, especially during the times that we are going through currently, especially when we are dealing with our students, being at the offices or in our classes. I think empathic listening is extremely needed at this point. So I would like to ask you, is it possible to give us an example of or two of micro actions that we can do daily?
Yes, the micro, I'll just maybe share a bit about the how and then the what, huh? What actions. Sure. Most of the micro actions when we are in a listening mode comes from what we are listening to. So for example, if I were to ask you, it is Jocelyn I am speaking with?
Yes.
If I were to ask you, you've been listening to this presentation, to some of the concepts for the last few minutes. If you were to think of one gesture, one action that you could do following this presentation, what comes to mind or what comes to heart? I know that you've mentioned your classroom, you've mentioned students. So what would be?
Trying to understand them without judging.
Yes. And then how could you do that?
Maybe by trying to differentiate between the situation that I'm in and the situation that maybe I'm living outside of the office, or how I deal with situations outside of my work environment.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you could, for example, create a moment in your classroom to really address what it is that you're sharing. So that could be a when to do it, how to do it, and the action would be, well, I'm wanting to practice non-judgment. Wow.
Okay.
What does it mean to observe? Just to observe, to receive, and not to evaluate or not to immediately find a solution, just to receive, let it sit.
Okay.
And this is in learning, because I know that's what you're involved with. This is exactly what we mean between reflection and action. So when is it time to reflect? When is it time to act? And I act with what it is I've been reflecting on. So I would act from a non-judgmental perspective, as opposed to maybe the judgment that I had prior to the conversation. Yeah.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Okay. And yeah, I'm sure you could come up with more
Other
actions.
actions as
Yeah,
well.
for sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So pleased to be having this conversation with you today. Anyone else?
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you again for this insightful and ideas that really push us to think as Lebanese, mainly because of the things of the main current events that happen every couple of years. And in this regard, it's very interesting the micro actions that Jocelyn asked about. But what I'm really not afraid of, but what I really think about is how to be non-judgmental. I find it very difficult personally, as Lebanese first, because and I'm asking this question exactly to be able to know how to deal with students in classrooms and as a citizen in this country. So we live in an idea that is really focused on our religion, on our background, our village, and then it's really very difficult to remove all these ideas from our head and be non-judgmental facing the other communities. And I guess it's very important for us and for this generation mainly to be able to move forward. So how can we learn? What are the micro actions to not be non-judgmental, to be able to have empathic listening?
Uh, Thank you, Mirna. First of all, I'll say that I really like your initials, MB, and I guess I'm not being very objective because they are mine as well.
I like
So
yours.
so we share something in common. Um, hmm. I will start by saying that it's almost impossible to be non-judgmental. So at least to recognize that as humans, we have this automatic mechanism, and it's part of our survival, right? In the sense that I need to make sure that I am safe. And usually most of the judgments come from the perspective that I need to make sure that I am safe. But once I've answered that question, that I am safe, then it's okay, so what to do then? The non-judgment practice, from Charmer perspective, so that's a theory U, is all about, because that's the voice of judgment. So when my mind, and it is at the mind level, when my mind is closed, I judge. And people judge because when I'm judging, I do not have to think. I do not have to reflect. I only need to act from a knowing perspective. So in other words, and that's different from critical thinking, right? But when I am judging, And it could be a judgment based on how the person is dressed. It could be a judgment on, we have all kinds of judgments. Sometimes we're just walking on the street and we even have an opinion about the person who's on the other side that I don't even know. So where are these coming from? So those are existing thoughts, existing mental models that are there. In other words, I judge when the mind is closed. So the approach here in terms of the practice, how do I eventually practice non-judgment, knowing that I cannot stop myself from judging? So how do I open my mind? One way is to become curious. To become curious, and how do we do that? By asking questions. So instead of engaging in a conversation from my knowing, from what it is that I know, I enter the conversation from an unknowing. And there's another way in terms of curiosity. And this one is an interesting practice that we do in class as well, and in other settings, which is mostly learn how to ask questions to which or for which you do not have an answer. So then you'll even be curious in the way the other person tells his or her story. So curiosity is about wanting to discover the other person's story, and not necessarily from the perspective of wanting to validate or to share mine. So what listening does is that it helps us to allow other people to tell their stories. And it is through their stories that somehow something changes inside of me. Does that make sense, Myrna?
Yes, it makes sense. Thank you so much.
So how could you become curious about what I just said?
I'm a journalist, so I am born with curiosity. So that's not a problem for me.
Okay.
So the thing is, I'm going to talk about this to others so they can read maybe more and become more curious and less judgmental. Because yes, we're closed. I totally agree that some communities are really closed and do not accept the other and do not want to listen to the other stories. And even if they listen, they do not want to acknowledge or validate because we think, But yeah, I totally got your point. Thank you so much.
And that's exactly, and thank you for highlighting this. That's exactly what empathy is. Empathy is the ability to stay in your shoes and to be in the other person's shoes without leaving your shoes. And some people do not even dare do that. They always speak from their own shoes. They never go into the other person's shoes. So that's when we talk about shoes, of course, it's a visual. And at the same time, what we're wanting to do here is the empathy comes from being able to relate, to connect to the other person's story, and allow the other person's story to be told so that it can even transform my own story. And that's the difference between, and we don't have all the time today, but eventually we may have a second round at this. Eventually, that's the difference when we talk about religious beliefs and social beliefs. And sometimes the two are not very clear.
True.
Thank you.
Merci à vous.
Ben, merci beaucoup, j'apprécie. Jocelyn ou Jocelyne?
Yeah, I just wanted to add something on your conversation with Mrs. Basile, because I think that currently we really need to work on this point, and we needed to hear this about non-judgment, because especially that we are going through the ceasefire period, and since war is technically, or between quotation marks, over right now, I believe that the Lebanese people unconsciously are judging each other, and they are pointing fingers, especially that we are currently living an emotional roller coaster, trying to understand what has happened in the past few months. So we really need to focus on the non-judgment in order to avoid future conflicts in the society. So I guess what the conversation that you had with Mrs. Mirna is really interesting and really important for us to focus on right now.
Thank you. And I may complete what it is that I shared in terms of open mind, knowing that the open mind is about practicing curiosity. And then the deeper we go about having an open heart, that's to practice compassion. So you'll see it's a 3 C's. So open mind, practicing curiosity, open heart, practicing compassion, and open will. And that's where the action comes from, right? The open will, which is courage. So with curiosity, compassion, and courage, these are 3 practices that leads towards what Otto Scharmer calls letting go. So it's this notion of letting go to let come. So if I'm able to open my mind, my heart, my will, I'm able to let go of what it is that I need to let go. And the space that I create allows something new to emerge. So that's what openness does. But when two closed situation get together, that's more confrontation. So how do we open up? How do we allow for the mind, the heart, and the will to be open?
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, Marie-Thérèse.
Bonsoir. Moi, je m'exprimerai en français.
Ça va?
OK. Merci pour commencer pour votre présence et l'intervention. Et évidemment, moi, comme je suis de background infirmière, la question d'empathie est déjà un peu... nous avons, c'est-à-dire, une certaine idée ou un certain exercice de l'empathie. Maintenant, moi, je voudrais souligner un point qui m'a attiré l'attention, c'est la résonance. Et c'est le point qui a fait résonance, si vous voulez, chez moi. Mais en tant qu'enseignant et en tant qu'enseignant dans une classe et dans notre problématique actuelle que les collègues viennent d'explorer, je trouve que le problème, c'est que il faudrait montrer de l'empathie ou pratiquer de l'empathie, mais comme on est en groupe et que chacun dans ce groupe a aussi sa résonance, ses résonances et son background, etc. Et comment gérer, surtout quand il y a quelqu'un qui ne respecte pas les autres, par exemple. On pourrait comprendre son background, ce qu'il vit, etc. Mais quand on est dans une communauté, faire de l'empathie à un ensemble de groupes, bien pratiquer l'empathie avec un groupe, un ensemble de personnes différents, devient quand même pas assez facile. Ou les rendre empathiques aussi, les uns par rapport aux autres.
Oui, de pratiquer l'empathie, c'est ça. Il y a deux... merci d'abord pour votre partage et aussi pour votre questionnement. Ce qui me vient en premier, il y a peut-être une distinction à faire parce que ça, des fois, on ne la fait pas toujours. Puis, étant donné qu'aujourd'hui, je présentais dans un certain contexte, il y a quand même 2 types d'empathie. Il y a une empathie cognitive. Donc, en d'autres mots, je suis en mesure de comprendre l'autre, de comprendre ce que l'autre est en train d'exprimer d'un point de vue cognitif. Donc, je comprends, en d'autres mots, je peux donner un sens, je peux donner une interprétation. Puis, il y a aussi ce qu'on appelle l'empathie émotionnelle. Donc, l'empathie émotionnelle, là, on est davantage dans des espaces de résonance. Et souvent, ce qui arrive dans des contextes un peu plus formels, comme, thank you, Nicole, surtout dans un contexte formel à l'occasion, comme dans une salle de classe, ça veut dire qu'il y a un contexte qui fait en sorte qu'on doit créer des moments, ce que j'appellerais au moins inviter ou créer des moments intentionnels sur le plan relationnel. Ce que je fais dans mes cours, comme exemple, et encore là, c'est juste pour donner un exemple, je vais intentionnellement utiliser l'approche du cercle. Donc, au lieu de moi être devant le groupe, les étudiants étant en rangée, je crée une structure qui va être davantage égalitaire, une structure dans laquelle on n'est plus dans une hiérarchie de pouvoir, comme exemple. Donc, éventuellement, si jamais c'est des sujets qui vous intéressent, on peut même, oui, on peut pratiquer le cercle physiquement, mais on peut même éventuellement, quand on est habitué de travailler avec le cercle, on peut même le créer sans nécessairement être assis dans un cercle. Donc, ça a beaucoup à voir aussi avec la posture, hein, notre posture de réception. Et c'est certain que dans un mode hiérarchisé, quand les pouvoirs sont divisés, toute occasion où on peut s'asseoir ensemble dans un contexte égalitaire, au moins du point de vue humain, où on est capable de respecter la dignité, où on s'est entendu sur 2 ou 3 règlements de base qu'on pourrait rédiger ensemble. Et de façon intentionnelle, on crée des espaces pour discuter de certains sujets. En d'autres mots, tout peut être discuté. Ce qui nous intéresse, c'est de comment les discuter et comment apprendre à avoir des relations. Il y a énormément de confusion en ce moment parce qu'on est dans une société d'information. Il y a une confusion, surtout et c'est ce que j'observe, il y a une confusion entre la communication et l'échange. Donc, ce n'est pas parce que j'ai communiqué, que j'ai donné mon point de vue, que je suis en train d'échanger avec une autre personne. Et en ce moment, on a des gens, une génération qui est très, très axée sur la communication et qui a très peu appris, mais qui a une soif d'apprendre à savoir, comment recevoir la communication de l'autre et comment entrer en relation avec les deux communications. Et ça, c'est un phénomène de la société d'information où on est très appelé à s'exprimer, mais il y a très peu d'espace de réception. On est toujours dans le don, très peu dans le recevoir. Je ne sais pas si ça aide, mais je pourrais certainement échanger davantage avec vous si vous souhaitez créer des espaces que j'appellerais intentionnels d'échange, de conversation, de dialogue. Donc, en d'autres mots, on doit changer la forme de conversation. Est-ce que ça a du bon sens?
Il faut venir voir nos talk-shows à la télé, hein. Parce que là, c'est des monologues, pas de dialogue, pas de conversation, pas d'échange, rien.
C'est ça. Et c'est comme ça sur les réseaux sociaux aussi.
Évidemment.
Oui. Donc, ça fait partie, en d'autres mots, ça fait partie de là où on est aujourd'hui. Et comment est-ce qu'on peut, d'une certaine façon, recréer des espaces relationnels.
Entendu.
Merci. I believe the next person is Pitya. I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. If not, please educate me.
As a student, how can we overcome the natural tendency to judge other cultures based on our own cultural norms? As we grew up in schools and now in university with people who have different cultural background, religious views, and political view, how can we overcome judgments on them?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for that question. I guess I'll share with you a 3-step process because it goes back again to opening, but I'll attempt to say it in a more concrete way if that's possible. So in other words, Pitya, my understanding of your question is that as human beings, because I want to be as generic as possible, as human beings, let's say that we meet on the street. We say hello. You may even choose to respond or not, but I'll just use the assumption that you are responding, so that at least there's a potential to have to create a conversation. The moment I see you, the moment you see me, we come together with what is called sometimes a mental model, sometimes it's called assumptions, sometimes it's called beliefs. In other words, you already have a frame, a way of seeing me, and a way of understanding the world. So when your frame meets my frame, if we don't do anything together, it will just be confrontation or a conflict. So this is one way to look at it. My worldview meets your worldview. And that's where the curiosity comes in. So in other words, from the frame that we have, we need to unframe. What I call unframe is that I need to bring some air, some water, some fire, some elements into our conversation where my own frame will be questioned. Okay, I always thought life was like this, but now I'm listening to what the other person is saying, and somehow, yes, I would like to impose or I would like my frame to be bigger or better than the other, but this is not about bigger or better. It's about, wow, something's happening, and how can I become curious? So the curiosity will allow me to unframe some of my beliefs, some of my assumptions. What the listening does is that it allows for the third movement. And the third movement is together. So both frames coming together, we become curious about each other's stories, and it's sort of changing things inside of me. It's sort of validating others. And what is it through our relationships that we can reframe? So framing, unframing, reframing. And those three movements are not always possible, but when you are in that dance, if I can use that expression, when you are able to recognize your frame, recognize the other person's frame, enter into some form of exchange so that you are either learning, and most of all, where you are unlearning. So in other words, to become curious is to unlearn. And we're very, very focused on learning, right? So with this unlearning that I'm doing, I'm able to relearn. So frame, unframing, reframing, learn, unlearn, relearn. How does that sound?
It's great. As a journalist student, I'm a bit curious to know more about others' culture and views.
And that curiosity can help you unlearn some of the small T truths that you always thought that life was that way. And then life is so large. It can be your way, plus the other person's way, plus the other person's way. And what does that create together? And that's where the relationships come in. And that's what listening allows. So it's not just about telling, it's about being able to receive the other person's story and especially allow the other person to share his or her story. Thank you so much. I guess it's time to thank you. Hopefully we will have other moments together, and wishing you lots of healing moments to find resonance, and most of all, to find a loving ear close to you. And if you can't find one, to at least be one for somebody else.